and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 486, and today's date is October 7th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The U.S. Preparing for the Real Mission in Syria, the Removal of Assad. Now, we can see the United States government central bankers, they're inside Syria, they're bombing, and what they're doing, they're strategically bombing certain areas. I mean, they're focusing on the infrastructure of Syria, and they're especially focusing on the east and the northern area, especially where Turkey meets Syria. And we can see what they're trying to do is clear an area, a buffer zone between Turkey and Syria, so they can implement a no-fly zone. Now the question is, why do they need a no-fly zone? The Islamic State has no planes whatsoever, but we have to remember Assad has an air force, and this is why they've been targeting the air bases in Raqqa and Deir az-Zor, and they're continually doing this in Aleppo also. And we can see they're completely clearing out this entire area. Now, of course, to bring this full force and to get Assad, they're going to eventually have to bring troops into Syria, boots on the ground. And we can see they're already starting in Iraq, where they're ramping up the advisors, bringing more in. The reports that the United States central bankers are preparing to bring in about 13,000 military soldiers into Spiker Base. They already set up a division headquarters center there to handle this, because we understand that can handle between 10 and 30,000 soldiers. So we can see right now they are preparing for something, and they're getting ready to push this forward. Now, of course, they need to do this first with the airstrikes, and wherever the Islamic State goes, that's where the United States just so happens to follow. And they never really seem to hit the Islamic State whatsoever, because they don't want to, because they're the ones who are controlling them. They're the ones who are paying them, and they do not want to, mess up their proxy army, because they need it at this point. Eventually, there might be a time where they're saying, okay, now it's time to get rid of them, and they'll actually bomb them. But at this point, they need them, they're controlling them, and they're doing exactly what the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations want them to do at this point. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the report. Now, it seems that all the private Western central bank countries, they are completely falling apart. I mean, if you look at this, everything is really starting to decay very, very quickly. Japan right now, the Cabinet Office revised down its economic assessment, signaling a possible turning point from weakening. According to the Cabinet Office, such a change in assessment provisionally indicates a likelihood that the economy has already fallen into a recession. This is effectively akin to the government acknowledging that the economy is in a recession, which means Japan is now in its third recession since Lehman and fourth since 2008. So Japan is not doing very well. Now, we understand Europe is completely falling apart, and we can see right now the IMF is looking at this, and they're saying, you know what, we're going to have to slice the global growth view on the Eurozone, because we are not seeing anything good coming out of this area. The IMF now sees 2014 global growth of 3.3% and 2015 growth of 3.8%, a decline of 0.1% for 2014 and 0.2% for 2015 from forecasts made in July. And we can see right now that Europe, they're bringing the growth down. In the United States, they're seeing that the growth is going to stay the same or get a little bit better in 2015, which we know is absolutely ridiculous. From all the real indicators that we're seeing, we know that the growth here in the United States is completely falling apart, and what they're using now is complete manipulated illusionary numbers to keep everything looking really, really good. And we understand they went back in time and they changed the calculations and how they calculate inflation, how they calculate unemployment, and how they calculate GDP. I mean, they went all the way back to 1929 to include research and development, and they recalculated GDP all the way up to the present time, so the GDP would be in the green area to show a positive growth, but we know that this is complete fake, phony, and false. Now, it looks like Germany is really getting hit hard right now. It looks like foreign orders have dropped by 8.4%. Investment and good orders tumbled to 8.5%, and basic goods fell 3%, and domestic orders 2%. The austerity plan has proven to be severely unpopular in the Eurozone, and we can see that many of the countries, especially France right now, the people have spoken. We do not want austerity. The Eurozone is out there. The central bankers are saying, no, you have to do it this way. We need more money from the people. We need your natural resources. You will cut programs. You will make the people suffer, and you can see the people now are saying, you know what, enough is enough. We have had it. You can't take any more from us because we have nothing left. Now, the European Central Bank is meeting in Naples, and it looks like there's demonstrators out there, and they are really pissed off because what we have to understand is that there's 26 million jobless Europeans right now, and it looks like demonstrators pretty much express their anger by climbing the walls of the Royal Palace in Naples, where the European Central Bank was having their meeting, and they're just really angry and pissed off because in all of these European nations, we are seeing that unemployment is very, very high. Youth unemployment, depending on which country, but on average, it's anywhere from about 35% almost to 60%. And we have to remember, youth unemployment is the next generation. And if they're not working, they're not saving, they don't have good jobs, the next generation is completely doomed. Regular unemployment ranges anywhere from like 9% all the way up to 30%, depending on one nation. And the overall unemployment is about 11.5% right now. And we can see that this is just taking its toll on the people, and it's just not getting better. Now, here in the United States, what we're seeing is that the corporate media is out there telling us that, oh, there are so many companies out there that are hiring, but there's just no people. Nobody wants to work. That is absolutely ridiculous. Everybody wants to support their family. People like to buy things. People like to go on trips. People like food. And what they're saying is that this whole thing is really falling apart, and they're trying to spin this any way they possibly can to make you think that all these people that have fallen off the job market, that they really don't want a job. But what I say is actually the job market has left them, because I know many, many people, and actually there's been a lot of people writing in saying they have been sending out resumes for months now, and there's just no answer whatsoever. And that shows you that the job market has left the people. Total job openings of about 4.835K. This was supposedly the highest number of job openings since January of 2001, and just shy of the record high of 5.273K seen in January of the same year, just before the recession hit, to be precise. So basically in that same year, we had a very all-time new high number. And of course, during the same time period, we had Ben Bernanke out there saying they're not forecasting any type of recession anytime soon, and we had recession during that same exact year. There was, however, a big problem, because while according to the BLS survey, employers have almost never had more open positions, they have also decided to put an abrupt stop to hiring, something which certainly points to a major disconnect in the U.S. labor market. In fact, according to the JOLTS report, its far less tracked hirings number plunged from 4.934K to just 4.640K. This was the lowest number of monthly hiring since January's polar vortex, where the economy came to a screeching halt, where real estate was completely down, retail sales were down, and of course it was just too cold for everyone. It was snowy, and this is why all these numbers were down. And we know that's completely fake, phony, and false, because we came out of the winter and things have not improved whatsoever. What's worse, the 294,000 plunge in monthly hiring was the biggest monthly drop since June 2010, and was the third biggest monthly plunge in hiring since Lehman. So we can see right now it is not getting better out there. It is getting worse. But what's very interesting is that the automobile industry and the corporate media have been trying to convince us that the automobile industry is just booming and everything is fantastic. What's even more disturbing about the automobile industry is that the delinquencies on auto debt are surging. Repossessions are up 70% because people simply can't make their auto payment. And the latest data shows that a stunning one-third of new auto loans are in the form of a subprime debt. And this means those people have bad credit or no credit, as long as they have a heartbeat, got an auto loan because what they were trying to do is they were trying to pump up the retail sales, and of course automobiles is part of it. We also understand the manufacturing end of it tried to channel stuff, all the dealers, to make it look like manufacturing was going up also. And again, this is all fake and manipulated to make us believe that something's really happening when it isn't. And this is exactly what they do to keep their illusion alive. And this should really tell you what the underlying health of the economy is really like. Because when you see something like this, this tells you something is very wrong. Now, if we look at the subprime market for auto loans, we see back in 2007 and 2008, they were hitting all-time new highs. And then, of course, it crashed in 2009. Now, since that time, they've been pumping up the subprime auto loans once again, and we're reaching the same period right before the crash in 2008. We are almost even with it. Now, the corporate media is out there, and they are completely trying to convince everyone that this holiday season is going to be incredible. The National Retail Federation said Tuesday that it expects sales during the November-December period to be up 4.1%. Analysts say retailers will need promotions to lure shoppers in. Well, they're going to need more than that to lure them in. And the reason why they're saying this, because of all the positive economic news lately. A surge in hiring last month helped push down the nation's unemployment rate to a six-year low of 5.9%. And they're seeing that the unemployment rate is very close to 5.5%, which is an indicator that we are in a healthy economy. Now, you have to think back and remember what was going on during last Christmas season. We were in the, I believe it was the 6.8% range in Christmas, and the year before that we were in the 7.5% or so range. And what has happened is each time the unemployment numbers have come down, the percentage has come down, retail sales continually get worse. Now that is kind of odd. Also, the same thing's happening with real estate. More and more of those people who would normally take out a mortgage drop off. So we're seeing unemployment continually fall, and we're seeing retail getting worse, and we're seeing people applying for mortgages getting worse, all at the same time. Why? Because, first of all, these people are getting part-time work, or they have fallen off and they're not counted anymore. So these job numbers are completely fake, phony, and false. And what we're going to see going into this Christmas season is this entire system completely fall apart. It is not going to be a good Christmas season because most of the people just don't have work, or they're underemployed, and they're not going to purchase these gifts and presents, and you're going to see a lot of stores hurting. You're going to probably most likely see Sears, JCPenney, Radio Shack, Kmart completely disappear, and you're going to see many other retailers say they are barely hanging on, and it is going to be absolutely awful. And again, we'll have to see if their special event occurs during this period where they completely cover up who collapse the economy, and they can use that to blame it that the Christmas season wasn't good, saying that, oh, look, Russia, China, they crashed the entire system and things are not going well here. We're in a wartime economy, and this is why Christmas is not good. This is why this isn't good. This is why that's collapsing. And they can completely turn it around and use this to their benefit. But of course, the collapse will continue. It doesn't stop the collapse. And this is why everyone needs to be prepared. Now, we understand that Obamacare is a complete disaster, and we're starting to see that more and more companies are starting to not hire people. They're keeping their numbers low. They're putting people on part-time. And of course, when Obamacare was coming out, the president and Pelosi and others said, no, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is not true. This will not be a job killer. And what we're starting to find out is, yeah, it is. CEO of the Pacific Research Institute said evidence is mounting that Obamacare raises health costs for small firms and thereby reduces workers' wages. A new study from the American Action Forum that concluded regulations imposed by the Affordable Care Act are reducing small business pay by at least $22.6 billion annually. In addition, those regulations and rising premiums have forced employment cuts of more than 350,000 jobs nationwide, with 5 states losing more than 20,000 jobs. American Health Policy Institute found that Obamacare will also shrink the labor force by reducing incentives to work. So we can see we have absolutely facts and proof that show Obamacare is hurting people getting jobs. And this is why people are having a very rough time finding work, and that's not the only reason. It's because the economy is completely falling apart and these numbers are fake. But what we're seeing now is many companies are getting rid of their health insurance, and they're making and forcing people to go on Obamacare. Walmart, they're saying they're facing expensive health care costs, so they are ending benefits for associates who work less than 30 hours a week. Like every company, Walmart continues to face rising healthcare costs. Associates will see an increase in premiums for 2015. For example, their most popular and lowest cost associate-only plan will increase by $3.50 to $21.90 per pay period. We're also changing eligibility for some part-time associates. We will continue to provide affordable health care to all eligible associates, including part-time, who work more than 30 hours. So those people who work less than 30 hours will be forced to go on to Obamacare. However, there are other retailers that have done this. There's Target, Home Depot, Walgreens, Trader Joe's. We will no longer be providing health benefits to part-time associates who work less than 30 hours. And of course, what they're doing is they're making many people part-time work. They're keeping the hours down. And this will impact about 2% of our U.S. total workforce. So we're seeing an increase in Obamacare because companies are saying we just are not going to give health care to these people. We're not going to cover the people who are making less than 30 hours a week. And we can see this whole entire system cannot survive in this way, because you have to remember, when you're working part-time and you're working less than 30 hours, you're not going to run to Obamacare and you're going to and just sign up with health insurance, because you're going to see these premiums and the deductibles and you're going to say, you know what, it's just not worth it. I can't afford this. And even if I do pay for it, the only time I can use is if I meet that deductible or I have something that comes up where I'm hospitalized. And most of the people are like, you know what? At this point in time, I'll just pay out of pocket. I'll save that $400 a month, and I have to pay out of pocket anyhow, so I'll just pay for my health insurance and take the penalty because it's much, much less. Now, there's something I wanted to bring up, and I understand the government has implemented Common Core in many of the states here. A lot of the states are fighting it. We understand they're trying to remove our rights. They're putting us in these caged boxes for First Amendment. They're trying to get rid of our weapons. They're searching us whenever they feel like it. But my kids and other kids that I know, just recently, and this was yesterday, they went into history class, and all of a sudden, the teacher said the government now wants you to answer this essay. And it was an essay about the Revolutionary War and who you think the terrorists are and who do you think the patriots are. And they had to write their response of why and who is a terrorist and who is a patriot. This was collected and then sent to the county, and then I guess it's going to be forwarded up to the government. Now, this is very interesting because they're trying to figure out which kids know what and where their minds are at, and you can see the tracking has already started of who is a patriot, who is a who believes that the government is who the government is looking at as terrorists, and you can see this is already starting here in the U.S. Now, I don't know how many of you have children out there, but you might want to ask your children if they had something like this, or maybe they're going to have it come up very, very soon. But I thought this was very interesting. It was completely out of the blue, where they wanted them to look at the situation. Were the founding fathers, fighting for freedom, were they terrorists or patriots? Was the British government terrorist or patriot? And they wanted them to explain what was going on in this particular essay. And I just wanted to bring this up because last year what they had was an assembly where they had to get the parents' permission to go into this thing called Project, I think, a Century, where they talked about weapons and how dangerous they were. That, do you agree with the Second Amendment? Don't you agree with the Second Amendment? And I purposely wanted my children to go there because I wanted to find out the information and what was it all about. And I posted that on the X22Report.com site in the document area, and you can see what the whole thing was all about. But this is just very interesting, and if anyone has the same experience as me, just write in and let me know what your children's experience was with this, because this is kind of out of nowhere and it just happened. Okay, let's move on to Ebola. Now, Spain has come out with a warning that something went wrong. Spain's Nursing Council warns something went wrong in the healthcare system's protocol. 22 more possible Ebola cases are under surveillance, having had direct contact with the infected nurse during the vacation after being infected, and they're trying to understand what is going on here. And we can see right now that there are no real protocols being followed with any of this in regards to Ebola. And we're starting to see that even here in the United States, that there are many violations of the protocols that has occurred in Dallas. Now, the numerous violations of the disease protocol surrounding the Dallas, Texas Ebola case are intentional, according to an emergency response manager, which is very interesting. The manager who was involved in the emergency response to both Hurricane Katrina and Rita, in addition to planning for smallpox outbreaks, said the official response to the first diagnosis case of Ebola in the United States purposely avoided the basic actions the government would take to prevent a virus from spreading. The reason I know the Ebola outbreak is being conducted on purpose is because it violates all protocols, he said. Government officials were slow to decontaminate the apartment of Thomas Eric Duncan before the apartment was sanitized. 5 Dallas sheriff's deputies were ordered to enter the unit without protective gear to remove Duncan's family members who were placed under quarantine. The workers were ordered to clean the sidewalk where Duncan vomited were also not wearing protective clothing, despite the fact that Ebola spreads through bodily fluids. Officials were slow to decontaminate the ambulance which transported Duncan to the hospital, meaning that the homeless man who was transported in the ambulance afterwards could have gotten infected. They're being ordered to stand down from the top. A former CIA officer, Robert David Steele, warned of an Ebola false flag a few weeks before Duncan's diagnosis. So we can see right now something is going on. Now, there are a couple things that are happening here. Either one, the government wants this to spread, and this is why they're having one stand down. This is why we're getting these CDC responses that contradict each other, that don't make sense. This is why they're saying, well, if we lock down flights from Liberia, it would spread Ebola even further, which makes no sense whatsoever. But we're starting to see that either one, the government wants this to spread, and this is why they're telling everyone to stand down. 2, they're so incapable of handling the situation that they're just bumbling idiots and they just don't know what to do. Or 3, this is a complete hoax, and they know it's a hoax, so they're not really worried about anyone getting infected. And again, We have to look at the entire situation, and of course, you still want to be prepared even if this is a hoax, because we don't know if it is. But it's one of these three type of scenarios here, and something just does not seem right with what is going on, because at the same time that all this happened, and I've said that West Africa and these nations, Ebola is contained in these nations, haven't really spread out through Africa whatsoever. The United States decided to send down 4,000 soldiers to this area, and we know they're going to be infected somehow, some way, because they're in the hot zone. And we also realize that they're really not taking any other type of precautions at this time. And at the same time the soldiers were headed down there, Liberia passed a law where no photographs are allowed of the sick. And this is all starting to look very, very suspicious. Now, the CDC actually sort of omits this on the Ebola page, on their Q&A page, where it gives a definition for direct contact. That actually sounds like the precise definition for what should be called indirect contact. The CDC says on its own website, what does direct contact mean? Direct contact means that body fluids, blood, saliva, mucus, vomit, urine, and feces from an infected person, alive or dead, have touched someone's eyes, nose, or mouth, or open cut wound, or abrasion. In other words, the CDC is saying that direct contact means indirect contact, touching the fluid that came from an infected patient. What this means is that you can acquire the Ebola infection without ever touching an Ebola patient. Now, we also understand that they're saying that if somebody sneezes or coughs and these droplets get put into the air and they're aerosolized particles, they can float over to you, get into your eyes, your nose, into your mouth, and you could be infected. So it is kind of airborne in that sense. But for those people who are interested in blocking the aerosolized particles, you can use either a half-face respirator or a full-face respirator. I would do a full-face one because this way it covers your eyes. The half-face respirators are readily available online or at hardware stores, and if properly fitted, they are extremely effective at blocking particles and aerosols. If you wear only a half-face respirator, your eyes are open, but if you're planning to put goggles on, make sure they don't have air holes around there and they fit snugly so it doesn't seep through. Also, which is good to know, bleach does kill Ebola, so it's a good idea to stock up on some bleach. And if you have come in contact with Ebola, it is good to pretty much scrub you down before you take the protective gear that you have on, and it's good to have another person there so they can use the bleach on you and pretty much decontaminate yourself. Now, it looks like back in 2000, the New York Times was reporting that the Ebola virus, which has caused deaths from high fever and bleeding in African outbreaks, can also infect without producing illness, according to a new finding by African and European scientists. The Ebola virus could persist in the blood of asymptomatic infected individuals for 2 weeks after they were first exposed to an infected individual. How much longer the virus can persist is unknown. So all those people that Thomas Edward Duncan came in contact with, or the nurse in Spain, or many other people, these people might not show signs of having it, but are carrying it where they can infect another person, which they're kind of leaving out completely. And like I said, it's either one of those three scenarios, that either they want this to spread throughout the country, or the government is so inept that they cannot get out of their own way to stop this, or this whole thing's a hoax and they know there's really no virus and it's just a scare tactic to see how everyone reacts to it. Now, we understand the armed forces are heading to Liberia. There's about 4,000 soldiers going there. That could be upped as time goes on, and we understand that in Liberia and many of these countries, there's no way that these soldiers will be able to maintain control around the borders or in the country. It's just not enough soldiers. It is enough soldiers to pretty much take over the government if they'd like to, but we can see right now this whole thing was completely set up to bring military assets into the region to take control, because we can see that China and Russia are in these countries. There's a huge amount of natural resources in these countries, and there's absolutely no reason to bring soldiers. All the other countries around the world are sending more medical supplies, doctors, and things like that. The United States had to include military assets, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Now, it seems that in North Korea and South Korea, we had a little skirmish go on. It looks like both sides fired on each other. And it seems like they're just flexing each other's muscles. And of course, what we're trying to see is the South provoking the North into them doing something. And we can see this all around the world. We see in Ukraine the same things happening, provoke, provoke. We see in the Pacific, provoke, because we have to remember the central bankers, they want a war and they want it to go live. Now, it seems that countries along the Nile, they're discussing a new treaty, and there are delays, and there is risk of war in this area. Countries that share the Nile waters on Monday warned that the region could go to war unless a new treaty on use of the Nile waters is drawn up. The Nile Basin countries have increased pressure on Egypt to get back to the negotiating table for discussions on how the waters of the world's longest river can be used. The Nile Basin includes 11 countries, and these are Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Egypt, Sudan, Tanzania, Burundi, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we can see right now, we're going to have to watch that very carefully and see what happens in that area. Now, there's a Russian official out there, and they're saying that Kiev is staging provocations to disrupt the peace process in eastern regions there, the ceasefire agreement. Despite the armistice, eastern regions of Ukraine see daily shellings with multiple rocket launchers and heavy artillery. Kiev has been staging all sorts of provocations for disrupting the peace process in the southeast of Ukraine. The regime in Kiev has been staging all sorts of different provocations, because what we understand is that the bankers didn't get what they paid for. They wanted the entire country of Ukraine. They didn't want the West. They wanted the Crimea region. They wanted the southeast. They wanted the ports in the Black Sea, and they did not get it. And they're angry, and they're going to do anything they possibly can to push the war agenda. Poland is pushing NATO, the new Secretary General, to put up the missile shield and point it towards Russia. And we can see why they want this to occur. We understand, because they realize when World War III starts, they want that missile shield in place. And parts of it is already in place, but of course they're saying it's pointing to Iran. And we all know that it is put very, very close to Russia. And we understand that it will be used for Russia when the time comes. Now, we understand that eventually the Islamic State was going to enter all the countries that were taken over by the people: Libya, Yemen, Lebanon. We've already had cases of the Islamic State in there, because wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the U.S. is going to follow. And now there's a video out there, and of course this is propaganda, where men are in the streets carrying the Islamic State flag to show that the Islamic State is now in Libya. This was done on purpose, because we have to understand that when we go full boots on the ground and we go full war, they're going to go into each one of these countries again, and they need an excuse, because, again, we have a bill floating around Congress where it says wherever the Islamic State is, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, or any other terrorist organization, the United States will go into these countries and remove them. And basically what that really means is all those countries that we lost and the puppet regime was removed, we're going to go back in there and reset it. And those countries that we want to get into, we're going to go into those, because we're going to say the Islamic State or a terrorist group is in those countries. And we can see they've already pointed towards Nigeria. Now, what's very interesting, they're using the Islamic State for pretty much everything at this point. Now they're saying that the Islamic State poses a threat to Singapore. Let's think why this is happening. Singapore becoming a global gold hub. We talked about this before, where they're going to be dealing in physical gold. Who doesn't want this to happen? The central bankers. And this is why this is coming out now, because they're threatening every single area that does not go along with the private Western central bankers. We can see the umbrella revolution in Hong Kong was to try to unseat the government in China. That's not really panning out. And now they have the Islamic State threatening Singapore, and the deputy prime minister is worried. He's getting information that the Islamic State is coming to Singapore. And we can see why this is being done, because basically they don't want all of this to go live. Because, again, they've been manipulating all the markets, the gold market, the stock market, the currency, all calculations. And when all these go live, things are going to start to fall apart rapidly. Now, what's very interesting about the Islamic State is they've given rules to journalists now, which seems absolutely ridiculous. According to the journalists, the rules stated that all correspondents must swear allegiance to Baghdadi, the caliph of the self-proclaimed Islamic State, receive a license from the Islamic State Media Office, and not publish any reports before showing them to the Islamic State officials. Wow, this sounds like the UK and the United States, doesn't it? Where you have to get a license from Dianne Feinstein, get it approved from the United States government, and then you're allowed to televise it. Same thing with UK. All those people who want to have their news stories or their vlogs or their videos out there, they have to go through the UK, get them approved, and then they can produce them. Basically, it's the same thing that's going on. Because who controls the Islamic State? That's right, the United States, UK, and Israel. Okay, now it seems like the Islamic State has taken over Kobani, which is the northern part of Syria, which is made up of a lot of Kurds. And what we're seeing is the Islamic State is running across the northern section of Syria, which borders Turkey, and they're clearing that section out. The United States is coming in and bombing this entire area, and what they're going to do is create a buffer zone in this area. U.S. airstrikes in Iraq are designed to help Iraqi forces beat back ISIS, whereas in Syria, we're not trying to take ground away from them. We're trying to take capability away from them. Basically, what the United States is saying is that we're not removing them from the area. We're pushing them to different areas, and we're decimating the infrastructure of Syria, and we continually push the Islamic State where we want them to go, because of course wherever they go, we follow. Now it looks like in Turkey is saying, listen, we will send ground troops to Syria only if Assad is targeted. Otherwise, we're not sending any type of personnel into Syria whatsoever. Now we can see what all this is being planned right now. The entire northeastern section is going to be a buffer zone. It's going to be cleared out right now. There will be no Syrian forces in this area bordering Turkey. You can see this is being prepped. NATO is out there saying, listen, we have contingency plans now. We will back Turkey if they're attacked. We will use and implement Article 5, which means all NATO forces will come down with Turkey to get into Syria. So we can see right now this is all being done on purpose. Now, there are reports out there that nearly 350 U.S.-led airstrikes over the past 3 weeks have failed to stem advances by the Islamic State. There are mounting signs of justifications being prepared right now and plans being made for an escalating presence of U.S. ground forces in the region. McCain and Graham are out there saying, listen, we need to remove Assad to defeat the Islamic State, and this is the only way we can do this. And we can see we're already starting the propaganda. It's already being put forth that there's going to be ground troops, that we're going to have to go after Assad, and they have to figure out a way how to bring these ground troops into Syria. Because once they do this, this is a foreign force on a sovereign nation's land, and this is going to pose a huge, huge problem. This is why they're beefing up the Khorasan terrorist group. This is why they're saying they haven't been obliterated. They're still out there. An attack on the U.S. is imminent. This is why that bill is trying to get passed in Congress right now. And we can see this is all being ginned up to put boots on the ground, to go after Assad, and the main problem is going to be Russia, because we understand Russia's military ships are in Tartus, which is a port of Syria, and we can see that once they go into Syria, they know for a fact that Iran will come to the assistance of Syria because they have an agreement between the two countries, and this is exactly what they want. They will then eventually go into Iran, but of course Russia and China are also backing Iran, and we're going to have to see how these countries react, because again, this eventually will create World War III, and this will make it go full-blown. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.